In this training module, we will configure DMNX so it can run an other polling task. This will allow us to check DOSS status on a device. After setting it up, we will create a custom view in the device list so that you can quickly see the results of the last other polling task. First, let's look at the admin guide to see what other polling covers. In the admin guide, we will do a search for other polling and select Next until we get to the list of items other polling covers. Notice that other polling gets information on the firmware and SDK versions, the embedded application list, the DOSS information, web image monitor information, HDD encryption, and other items. The one we are concerned with for this training module is DOSS information. To create the other polling task, go to Discovery and Polling, Polling. Notice that in the default poll, which comes when you install the system, the other polling is enabled by default and set to happen daily at 5 a.m. If you want to set a separate polling task, you can create a new one by selecting the plus Add button. For training purposes, we will call this new task Other Polling and give it a description of User-Created Polling Task. Go to Status Polling, Supplies Polling, and Counter Polling and confirm that the checkbox is set to Disable. In Other Polling, enable it by deselecting the Disable Schedule checkbox. We will set it to an interval of every 6 hours. The advanced settings enable you to prohibit times for it to run. For example, if you don't want it to run during standard working hours, you can enter 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock as the start and end times. Note that this uses a 24-hour clock, which is why we enter 1700 instead of 5 o'clock as the end time. Then we need to confirm that polling is also disabled for user counter and detailed counter polling. Save the polling task. Note that all polling is disabled except for the other polling task. Next, we will set up a list of target devices. In most cases, we would select Groups, select all devices, and then Save. However, in order to keep the task short for training purposes, we will select a very small set of devices in Brooklyn, New York. Be sure to arrow it over to the target groups list. Then select OK and save the task. This task will process on the schedule of every 6 hours, but if I want it to run immediately, I can select the blue Run Immediately button to run the task. The first place you can go to see that this task is running is under System Task Log. You can see that the other polling task is running. To see an updated view, you must select the Refresh button. The task log does not display updates in real time. Another way to look at this is to select Filters, select the category Other Polling, and select the Enter key to refresh. Now we can see only the other polling tasks, and we can see start and finish times. When I click on a completed polling task, I can see all of the devices that didn't respond the last time the polling happened. The result shows failed, but that just means a subset of the 690 devices didn't respond the last time the poll task ran. If I want to see those devices that didn't run, I can export to a CSV file. I can then take this list and investigate the devices to determine why they didn't respond. While the poll task is running, we will set up a device view to show the DOSS and HDD encryption status. DOSS and HDD encryption are two of the items that are checked in other polling. In a high security environment, especially one subject to government regulations, it would be a good idea to be able to check at a glance for any devices in which DOSS has been disabled so it can be turned back on. To create a new view, select a view to start with. For training purposes, we will select the status view. Then we will freeze the first two columns to keep them on the left. Right-click on any column to add additional columns. We will add the DOSS-enabled and HDD encryption columns, and then freeze those columns. Finally, we will go back and add the additional DOSS columns. These will report the last time a file was auto-deleted with DOSS, the method of deletion such as NSA or DoD, and the number of overwrites that took place. We can then freeze those columns as well to bring them to the left. Then select View, Save As, and give the view a name, such as DOSS HDD Encryption. Now the view is saved, but you can see that there are many devices without DOSS enabled. We can sort descending to view the enabled devices. Notice that with all the frozen columns, the scroll bar is no longer visible. To make it visible, we will need to make some of the columns narrower. For those highly secure accounts who need to keep DOSS enabled, we can enable filters and select the DOSS enabled filter, and select those devices that are capable of DOSS but in an off status. I can then send a technician out to initiate DOSS on those devices. Notice that you can view both DOSS status and HDD encryption status in the Main Properties tab of a device on the device list. Let's look at standard device preferences and create a new standard device preference template. We'll call it DOSS Enabled Remote. In the description, we'll point out that this will only work if DOSS has initially been enabled by a RICO technician manually in front of the device. This is very important because when you look at standard device preferences and security, it shows that you can, using the DMNX management extension, enable DOSS, select the method of overwrite, and choose the number of overwrites. These changes will only work on a device that has been previously enabled by a technician and then turned off. This will then re-enable it. This can be used to turn DOSS off remotely, but it will only turn DOSS back on if it has been turned on before by a live technician. DMNX cannot change SP mode settings, which is required to enable DOSS for the first time. This is the reason DOSS must first be enabled by a technician at the panel of the device. If we go back and look at the list of devices in the DOSS HDD encryption view, we can see that some devices are listed as DOSS enabled on, some are listed as off, and some have no listing at all. The ones listed as off are either ones that have been initially turned on by a technician and subsequently turned off, or ones that have never been turned on at all. You can create a task to turn those devices on, but only the ones that have been previously enabled by a technician will work. The rest will fail again. The last item, which displays neither off nor on, is a device where DOSS has never been installed. Most devices within the last few years are shipped with DOSS installed, but early models needed DOSS to be purchased as an option and installed after the factory install. These devices, if DOSS was never installed, will display with no setting in this column.